Welcome into the Weather Review. I am Gavin White. Happy meteorological spring to you and yours. March 1st is the start of meteorological spring within the weather community. Not yet astronomical spring. True, the spring equinox isn't until March 20th, and we're halfway between spring and winter. However, March 1st is the start of meteorological spring, which is kind of kept for statistical and climatological record purposes. But still an interesting tidbit nonetheless. So happy spring, even though it's not yet spring, but we can still say it's spring because it's March. It's a good time. It's a good time of the year. Things are starting to warm up. This is, it's been a pretty quiet week in terms of weather across the country. Not a whole lot of interesting stuff has happened. We had a couple thunderstorms up here in Columbus. Got a video of a lightning strike next to the horseshoe. It was pretty cool. It's up on my Twitter if you're ever curious, at the Gavin White WX. Aside from, it's been a very quiet week in the weather world. So I thought I would do something a little bit different this week. And this is something that's been in the news since this past Thursday. And it's something that's pretty significant, I think, and I think it's worth talking about, even briefly, at least just to provide some insight, kind of understanding what's going on with the NOAA staffing cuts that took place this past Thursday. If you haven't been following or haven't seen in the news, several hundred probationary employees were terminated from NOAA this past week. Now, probationary means that they have been there for a year or less than a year. Because with the way the federal government works, the majority of jobs, you're hired and you're on a probationary status for your first year, and then you're a full-time permanent employee, or whatever the terminology is. So they released virtually every probationary employee within NOAA. This includes the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center, which are both under NOAA. NOAA is kind of like the overarching agency, and then within that it has the National Weather Service as a sub-agency, and then the National Hurricane Center, which is responsible for the hurricanes, which are both part of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. But yes, this was a NOAA-wide release that affected meteorologists, IT techs, mechanics, maintenance, modeling scientists, kind of on every agency and sub-agency within NOAA, again, including the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center, which is just not the greatest of timing, with it being the start of the severe weather season. March is the start of severe weather season. This is when tornadoes really start to ramp up in the plains and the Midwest and in the South as well, kind of now through the start of the summer. And with hurricane season later on this year, it's never a good time, but it's really unfortunate this is taking place right at the start of severe weather season when we need all hands on deck that we can get, especially given that the National Weather Service in particular has been understaffed for the last few years. Very few forecast offices across the country are operating at full capacity. Simultaneously as this happened, and what's been going on for the last couple of years and expected to continue through the end of the decade, there is a large retirement wave as well that's begun within the agency, because a lot of meteorologists that were brought on decades ago, they've served their time, moving on to retirement. Good for them. So it's kind of this double whammy. If you're losing all these senior seasoned meteorologists and forecasters and scientists to retirement, while at the same time all the new people just got cut, which kind of puts NOAA and the National Weather Service in particular in a very tough position when looking at its future, and especially with looking at its immediate future with severe weather season on the horizon. So some of the immediate implications that we're already seeing as a result of this, and this just happened this last week. 11 of the 38 National Weather Service forecast offices in the central United States, so 11 of the 38 in the central U.S., are now critically understaffed. Now, I already mentioned a majority of Weather Service offices are just understaffed, period. That was before all the probationary workers were fired. Now, 11 of the 38 in the central U.S. are critically understaffed, meaning that they have to rely on neighboring weather forecast offices to maintain the current level of their services. And again, this is the central U.S. This is Tornado Alley. This is the most sensitive region of the country to severe weather, to impromptu severe weather. I say that because the other National Hurricane Center is also impacted, but we can forecast hurricanes so far out. This is yes, this is concerning that this part of the country is now this critically understaffed. That can very well increase the likelihood for unwarned tornadoes, especially if there's a tornado outbreak across the region. There's just not enough manpower to be able to keep track of all the different storms, watching all the data coming in to ensure, does the storm need a warning, does the storm not need a warning. I'll talk about more about that in a second. So there's a lot of critically understaffed offices now within the National Weather Service. Another immediate implication that we've already seen, the National Weather Service office in Aberdeen, Alaska, I believe I said that right, Aberdeen, Alaska, has indefinitely suspended their weather balloon launches due to being shorthanded. Now, weather balloons are a very important piece of equipment that collects data, and they're important because they give us an instantaneous vertical profile of the atmosphere. We can see from the ground up to like 15 miles what's going on in the atmosphere. What's the temperature? How much moisture is there at the different levels? What are the winds? Where are they out of? What are the wind speeds? It tells us a lot about what's going on in the atmosphere at a given time when it's taken. It's incredibly valuable information that's used in countless different situations and circumstances. I mean, it can be used to kind of help determine, all right, is there, the environment for severe weather? Now, I doubt you're going to see a tornado in Aberdeen, Alaska, but still, the point is weather balloons they're very crucial pieces of information. And we're losing, at least one office has announced that they're suspending their balloon launches just because they don't have enough people on hand. And it might sound kind of a little strange. I have launched weather balloons before, and it's typically a two-man job. You need two people to be able to effectively do it. So with them saying they're shorthanded, that kind of implies they don't have two people to spare. They need everyone inside the physical office that they have, which is concerning. Now, more of the potential long-term implications of losing all these probationary employees and some of the fallouts of having critically understaffed offices and indefinitely suspending balloon launches. I mentioned this earlier with the central U.S., but there's increased likelihood for unwarned tornadoes, especially if there's a tornado outbreak. If there's a large multicellular outbreak of storms within one forecasting office's region, if they're critically understaffed, they don't have the manpower to be able to watch all these different storms, all the data that's necessary to see, is the rotation going on? Is the rotation close to the surface? Are we confident there's a tornado occurring? While also keeping up with the phone lines, people reporting tornadoes, and keeping up with the other responsibilities that a forecast office would need to do, such as forecasting, despite the fact there's an ongoing severe weather threat, which is a little concerning. Now, again, they can rely on the other neighboring offices, but they're also dealing with similar things. They can pass off some of that responsibility as needed, which is what's nice about the National Weather Service, that there's flexibility built into it. But if all these offices are experiencing the same thing and it's a large enough event, you're not going to be able to do that because everybody will be needed. There's not enough people to fulfill all the roles that are necessary. So that is a possibility of the increase in the likelihood that a tornado goes unwarned just because it's missed, because there's not enough eyes looking at it. Another possibility is dealing with radar blackouts. So again, it's all probationary employees within NOAA. Pretty much all probationary employees within NOAA were terminated. That includes radar technicians. There are designated people whose job it is, among other mechanical related things, but to work on the radars if a radar goes down for various mechanical or technical electronic reasons. If an office doesn't have that technician and their radar goes down, that's a large swath of the country. That is a very large area that is now a black hole. We don't know what's going on. We can't see what's going on in terms of radar within that region until it's up and running. And if they don't have a local tech, it's going to have to be one from a neighboring region. That's going to take time for the travel to get it fixed and get it back up and running, elongating the likelihood of having a radar blackout, which again, if there's weather coming through, that is concerning because you can't see what the weather's doing. And if you can't see what it's doing, you can't issue warnings because you have no eyes, no visual on what's occurring. Again, which is concerning, but that's just a potential implication. Something that a lot of folks might not think of is the implications to weather modeling. Weather models are crucial for helping to create a forecast. They themselves are not a forecast, but they help to assist in the forecast because the trends in weather models are where they're valuable. However, there are staff within NOAA dedicated to maintaining and improving these models. There are people whose job it is they run and they maintain and they improve upon based off what they know and what they've seen and kind of where we know different models struggle, where their strengths and weaknesses are, we can improve on them. There's people whose job there are very, very intelligent people. That is beyond me. I'm not a modeler by any means, but they are still important to the critical role within that weather apparatus in the United States. Another side effect with kind of losing the staff, especially at the National Weather Service level, is you're decreasing the data collection efforts. And this goes back to what I was talking about with the balloon launches being suspended at the One Alaska office. Now, the weather balloon, so when a weather model runs, at the moment it starts running, it takes in all the most recent data, all the current observations from around the country, the most recent weather balloon launches, satellite data, the most recent radar data. It takes in everything you can possibly imagine to try to get the current state of the atmosphere across the country at the moment it began running, right? And then from there, it starts doing its modeling and projecting based off those initial conditions across the country, what's going to happen. So if you start removing these data pieces as a side effect of not having enough staffing to be able to maintain that data collection, so for example, weather balloons, you start taking out those pieces, you start reducing the reliability of these weather models because now they're relying on fewer data points to try to get that initial current state of the atmosphere right, which means that initial current representation of the atmosphere is slightly worse. And then as it tries to project forward with all the different possible combinations of things that could happen, if you have a slightly worse initial state, all your possible projections are going to be even more all over the place. There's going to be less consistency. It's going to be less reliable, really. And especially, too, with it being in Alaska. Alaska is critical for what it influenced. Upper level weather in Alaska influences weather across the entire contiguous United States. Jet stream comes right down over Alaska before doing this little wavy thing over the U.S., and that's how we get our different storm systems. Those weather balloons are crucial for us to see what's going on with the jet stream, as an example. So we're kind of missing that now. Possibility missing that with some of these models here in the short and long term, which is concerning. So that I think that is kind of the most immediate impact to this now exaggerated staffing shortage would be, the initial concern if there's a weather outbreak and having enough people to be able to communicate what's going on about that. However, the other side would be the functionality of NOAA and its sub-agencies. It directly impacts weather forecasts across the country. The entire weather machine in the United States is built upon NOAA. The TV meteorologists, the meteorologists for all the private companies, for the sports teams, for the air traffic planning, for shipping, storm chasers, YouTube personnel. Anybody that works in the weather field, regardless of who their employer is, they cannot effectively do their job without a fully functioning NOAA. That's what NOAA's ultimate value comes from, is their data collection and the infrastructure to do so. Between the organized weather balloons within the National Weather Service, there's over 160 radars that make up the U.S. radar network, the majority of which are housed under the National Weather Service, maintained and operated. NOAA operates 18 satellites. That's crucial for getting above, looking down what's going on with the atmosphere. Surface observations, NOAA's kind of the master at kind of organizing and maintaining all of that, breeding in all that data. Weather models, they run. It's the data collection and infrastructure that goes alongside it is what makes NOAA so valuable, and that data is necessary for any weather forecast from any company. I don't care if it's the Weather Channel, AccuWeather, your local TV meteorologist, the app on your phone. It all relies on data that comes from NOAA. And so that's the biggest concern with losing a lot of the staffing is, all right, well, how's this going to affect the data side of things? Because it will impact every forecast everywhere. Yes, that's kind of a little bit of a gist of kind of understanding the implications of some of these staffing cuts with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. If it kind of paints a bigger picture of why maybe so many meteorologists have kind of raised concerns about this in particular, just because it is it is concerning. I mean, it is a matter of public safety. I mean, that is the number one and most important consideration with this. It is a matter of public safety, and then it is every weather forecast in the country, regardless of the company or the forecaster or the meteorologist or the agency, it originates from NOAA. They're the backbone of the whole thing. So it is concerning to see that, especially at the start of severe weather season. I'm not going into the politics of it. I don't like talking about politics, but I did want to at least take some time here. Again, it was a quiet week in the weather, so I thought, why not take some time and kind of talk a little bit about kind of understanding the significance and implications of staffing cuts to NOAA, some of the more behind-the-scenes things that the agency does that maybe the general public isn't necessarily aware of. So I hope that was helpful to you. Maybe that was interesting. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But I appreciate you sticking around and giving it a listen. As always, please rate and review the show. Share it with a friend. I appreciate you listening to the Weather Review, and I will see you next week. Have a good one.